It's Tuesday, November 11th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes, and happy Veterans Day. Today in the show, what was it all for? After 40 days, Senate Democrats, well, just a handful of them, really, voted on a bill to reopen the government without getting any assurances that Obamacare and Medicaid subsidies would be extended, the thing that the entire shutdown was over in the first place. So I'm going to break down what happened this week, the fight it's now causing in the Democratic Party, and what happens in the House of Representatives, because we're not out of the shutdown woods here just yet. But first, make sure you're following or subscribe to the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got a brand new article coming out tomorrow, but just for paid subscribers. You can subscribe for $5 a month to get access to that, or free subscribers get access to all sorts of great free content, including weekly newsletters. A new one is expected to drop here in just a few weeks. I say that like I'm not the one controlling that. It will be out here in just a few weeks. And as always, share the show on social media. It's MIMS Newspod. It's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. You know, with the holidays around the corner, we're all going to parties, whether it's with your family, maybe it's a Friendsgiving, or the office holiday party where you're never really sure what to bring. Well, cookies will always do the trick. And with Molly B's gourmet cookies, you can bring bold, artistic craft cookies to your next party or even just to your own pantry. Each cookie is made in small batches to ensure a melt-in-your-mouth texture, exceptional quality, and unforgettable flavors. The Straight Fire, the one I like, marshmallows, chocolate, cinnamon cereal, and just a little bit of cinnamon whiskey. The Be Cordial is a delicious blend of chocolate and cherry. Or the Naughty Cookie, just in time for the holidays. It's a rich, warm chocolate, a subtle hint of spice, topped with fluffy mini marshmallows. It is the perfect balance of naughty and nice for this season. So whether gifting or just indulging on your own, Molly B's cookies elevate any moment, bringing gourmet delight to your pantry with no cookie shop required. And now you can enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code MIMS25 at Molly B's to get 10% off your next order. Now, Make It Make Sense does get a commission off that sale, but you get to support the show and you can wow all your guests at your next party. Molly B's gourmet cookies, bold, unforgettable flavors. They're the ultimate treat for any occasion. On Sunday night, the Senate finally voted on a measure to let them end the government shutdown. That vote was to end debate on the funding bill, which senators had been doing for 6 weeks. In order to explain how we got here and how 7 Democrats crossed the aisle for essentially nothing, I need to explain a little bit about how the Senate works in this instance. The act of ending debate is something called cloture, or a cloture motion, which, nerdily enough, comes from the same Latin word for cloche, the domed thing you put over food to stop stuff from falling in it while it's being served. So I kind of like to think of cloture motions as putting a dome around a bill that stops anything from happening to it other than a vote. Now, in the Senate, to get to a place where you can stop debate, you need 60 votes out of the 100 senators to avoid the filibuster, the rule in the Senate that allows any senator to control the Senate's time as long as they can stay standing and speaking. Now, this is a rule, like a handshake agreement, that can be undone by a normal majority, so 51 votes, to get rid of the filibuster altogether. The Republicans have those votes, and the president had been calling for days for them to take the nuclear option to end the vote by ending the filibuster. Now, basically, Trump wanted this because he's getting tired of the shutdown. Republicans were losing in the polls and being blamed for the shutdown because they control the government. Well, Senate Republicans didn't want to do that for reasons that aren't super clear, other than they just want to be able to use the filibuster when they're in the minority again at some point in the future. And instead, they got 7 Democrats and 1 independent who caucuses with the Democrats, which means he just goes to their meetings and votes with them, but isn't actually a member of the party, to vote with Republicans. Now, anyway, those 8 senators were John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada, Jackie Rosen from Nevada, Dick Durbin from Illinois, Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, Gene Sheehan from New Hampshire, Tim Kaine from Virginia, and Angus King, the independent from Maine. Now, they decided to break with their party to vote to end the government shutdown before actually voting to end the shutdown on Monday. Now, the key thing to know about all 8 of these senators, they're all either retiring, not up for re-election until 2028 or 2030, so they're in incredibly safe positions and won't have to answer to their voters for this vote, because by the time those who are going to run for re-election do, we'll all have moved on, or really, we'll have gone through 3 or 4 more of these things, these kinds of budget fights. And we won't remember this one, not really. So what's the deal that they all signed up for? Well, it would fund the government until January 30th. So, we'll be doing all of this over again right after the holidays. It undoes the 4,000 or so firings of federal workers and prevents any more from happening between now and January 30th. It also makes sure that those federal workers who have been furloughed or working without pay get their back pay, even though that's already a law on the books. It also fully funds SNAP or food stamps by funding the government, which is good news for the 42 million Americans who need it. Now, that does mean that likely the Trump administration won't face any consequences for refusing to fund SNAP, but I guess what else is new? And crucially, in this deal, these 8 Democratic defectors struck with Republicans, it does not include any assurances that they will alter or extend the Obamacare or Medicaid tax credits, the thing that Democrats were fighting for over the last 6 weeks. What they got instead was a promise to vote on it by the second week of December, but only in the Senate. Here's Angus King, the Independent, talking about it on Monday.
Well, Joe, you have to go back to what the strategy was at the beginning of the shutdown. There were 2 goals, both of which I support. One was standing up to Donald Trump. The other was getting some resolution on the ACA premium tax credit issue. The problem was the shutdown wasn't accomplishing either goals, and there was there was zero likelihood that it was going to.
The argument here is that the shutdown was always a losing game, and therefore giving up the ghost on this is totally fine, which begs the question, then why do any of this? If this was always how it was going to be, why do it? The answer is because King is wrong. From a Democratic Party point of view, the pressure on the White House and Republicans was working. 3/4 of all Americans support extending the ACA tax credits, and almost 2/3 of Americans support Obamacare overall, according to KFF. Trump's polling has been positive for 20 days, a record number of days in this term, and his approval is the same as Joe Biden's at the height of 9% inflation in 2022, largely because of the government shutdown. Now, the reason wanted to blow up the filibuster in the first place, like I said earlier, was because this shutdown was tanking his support and approval, and if he could end the shutdown quickly, he could move on. But instead, these senators agreed to a political pinky promise to get a vote on making sure 6 million Americans can keep their health insurance and stop insurance premiums from spiking on all of us. A promise, by the way, from the Republican Party, which has voted 100 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement idea. A promise from many of the members who voted those 100 times who are still in office. A promise from a party that refuses to stand up to the serial liar who controls their party and sits in the Oval Office, including refusing to say that the 2020 election wasn't stolen, and a promise from the party which over the last 40 days told flimsy, provable lies about what Democrats were actually trying to do when it came to extending these subsidies, like saying that they wanted to give free health care to undocumented immigrants. These are the people whose word these 8 defecting senators are going to take. Oh, and not to mention that they also knew that when this gets to the House, the speaker over there, Mike Johnson, has repeatedly refused to commit to bring this extension up for a vote. Here he was last week before these senators struck this deal.
No, because we did our job, and I'm not part of the negotiation. The House did its job on September 19th. I'm not promising anybody anything. I'm going to let this process play out. I tell you what they wanted.
And then here he was again last night.
So you're not committing to bringing up a bill that deals with the Obamacare subsidies before they expire?
I'm not committing to it or not committing to it. What I'm saying is that we do a deliberative process. That's the way this always works, and we have to have time to do that, and we will.
So that's not committing to it, even though it's a deal that his Republican colleagues in the Senate have agreed to. I'll get to what might happen in the House a little later in this episode, and normally the Senate and House kind of ignore what's happening in the other, but Democrats are cutting a deal with people here who are very much shaking their hands while also sticking a kick me sign on their backs. Now, this deal has very much driven a new wedge between factions of the Democratic Party. Let's start with the side that's the most upset. More than a half dozen House Democrats, as I'm recording this, have started to call for Senate Majority Leader and the most senior leader in the party, Chuck Schumer, to step down. Here's California Congressman Ro Khanna, who was the first to call for Schumer to give up his spot.
Time. Look, I've worked with Senator Schumer. He did an incredible job on the CHIPS Act, on the IRA, on infrastructure, but it's time for him to be replaced. He is not meeting the moment. He's out of touch with where the party's base is.
Now, a lot of people have been saying exactly that thing since the spring, when Schumer did the opposite of what Democratic voters want, which was to shut down the government to force Congress to stand up to the White House. And the thing is here that even if Schumer voted against this latest funding bill, which he did, he was still unable to prevent 7 of his own party members from not holding the line. And a leader who could do that is what a lot of elected Democrats and Democratic voters are asking for. I mean, 50% of all voters right now have an unfavorable view of Chuck Schumer as of September, according to Pew Research, making him the least popular Senate Democrat leader of all time. And it's why you're starting to see cracks in support for Schumer in the Senate, too. Arizona Senator and relative moderate Mark Kelly refused multiple times to say whether he supports Schumer during an interview on MSNBC. And for full transparency here, I've cut this up a bit just to give you those moments.
But is it leadership after 40 days? You, and I'm going to use the word that's all over social media right now, you cave. What happened here, do you think?
Well, I think, Chris, what happened is we are dealing with a president that just fundamentally doesn't care about people.
But I wonder if, as a result, you believe Chuck Schumer's leadership is in jeopardy, and should it be?
Well, as I've said, Chris, we are dealing with an irrational president.
Do you support Chuck Schumer to lead Senate Democrats going forward?
So, Chris, again, we found ourselves in a situation I don't think the Senate has found itself in before.
So that is three times he was asked, and 3 times he didn't say whether he thought Schumer should stay his party's leader. And when someone like Mark Kelly bumbles over direct yes or no answers there, that is not good if you're Chuck Schumer. Now, there are also a lot of Democrats, Schumer included, who don't think of this deal as caving, but actually them playing the long game. Here's what Schumer told the New York Times. Doing nothing is unacceptable, but that's the choice the Republican side made in obeisance to Donald Trump. Republicans owned this healthcare crisis. They knew it was coming. We wanted to fix it. Republicans said no, and now it's on them. And he's not wrong. When you think about it, what Republicans actually gained from the shutdown? Really, what did they gain? It's basically just bragging rights over Democrats. They'll still have to fund SNAP, even though the White House doesn't want to. They didn't get to keep their mass layoffs of government workers, even though the White House really wanted those. They're going to have to renegotiate all of this again in January, so that's more headache. They didn't stop insurance premiums from spiking, and they didn't save health insurance for anyone, because even after 10 years of saying they want to repeal and replace Obamacare, there's still no plan to do that. So in the end, what we got here was a shutdown that was massively disruptive to the nation, and we saw the true colors of just how far the White House and the GOP behind it are willing to go to harm Americans to score political points. And all of that will be a drag on Republicans in vulnerable elections in purple states and districts in the House, and could boost Democrats in those same places in those races next year. It's why what happens next in the House here is so important. So the House now has to take up the funding bill that was passed by the Senate. Right now, Republicans only have a 2-vote majority when the math is all worked out, meaning they cannot afford to lose practically any members before they'll have to cross the aisle to work with Democrats. Representative Thomas Massie, who has been firmly against Trump and congressional Republicans' refusal to stand up to him in the last 11 or so months, is expected to vote no on reopening the government. Now, that leaves a single vote majority, and if Republicans lose that, they might end up losing the vote overall. Now, the person who might actually force them into that position is somehow, of all people, Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman who blamed wildfires on Jewish space lasers, said Democrats controlled the weather and sent a hurricane to hit North Carolina, and has been one of Trump's most ardent supporters up until recently. Here she was on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher just a few days ago.
2025. Here's why I'm angry. The Democrats passed Obamacare, but yet the Republicans have never done anything to correct the problems that exist with it. And I blame my own party. That's absolutely wrong. And I don't think it's an easy thing to fix. However, it's something that we should have a plan for. And Mike Johnson, for a month now, cannot give me a single policy idea. And I'm angry about that.
So on this show, I did not think I'd ever be saying Marjorie Taylor Greene has a good point, but that is one, and it also makes her a thorn on Mike Johnson's side now. Now, she also wants to be a senator in Georgia, even though Trump reportedly blocked that from happening this cycle because he's pissed at her for bucking the party for the last few months. But still, what she's arguing there is what I've been saying lately, is that the price of being the majority party is having to lead, and she's calling on Republicans to lead on an issue that will likely ruin tens of thousands of American families and businesses if nothing is done. On the other side of this entire thing, there are two Democrats who could cross the aisle to vote with Republicans. The first is Jared Golden from Maine, who said he will not be running for re-election in a very conservative district that Trump won in 2024. He's crossed party lines before and might do it again. And Republican Henry Cuellar from the border district in Laredo, Texas, also seems ready to vote to fund the government. He praised the promise to vote on ACA subsidies despite Mike Johnson refusing to commit to a vote, and said on Twitter it's past time to put country over party and get our government working again for the American people. So what could happen is the parties just trade 2 votes for 2 votes and the government reopens in time for Thanksgiving. Maybe. The House doesn't vote until at the earliest Wednesday. And even then, it's not like the kinks will be worked out quickly, or flights will get undelayed, or checks will go out right away to federal workers. People will still be hurting. And that's the important thing to keep in the front of your mind here as you hear more about the shutdown for the next few days. No matter what happens, lives are and have been at stake. All of this can and is easily turned into the game of politics. I kind of did it in this episode, the X's and O's, whether your party owned the other party or not, successfully or enough. But I want it to be clear that in the end, tens of millions of people struggled to pay for food and went hungry for the last 2 weeks. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers and their families, including military members, are going through an incredibly painful and stressful time where they didn't have any income to make ends meet, and millions of people will either be priced out of their healthcare plans, causing them to lose insurance that many will not be able to get back, and millions more will see the cost of their plans increase to levels that will strain them to a breaking point. And those are the things that matter, especially as we head into a year where our elected leaders are asking for our money, our votes, and most importantly, our confidence in them to speak on our behalf. It's important that we don't forget about this, and we remind them that Americans broadly don't like government shutdowns and don't want their neighbors to suffer, and that they make sure that something like this can't happen again, or they'll face consequences at the ballot box. All right, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below if you're a watcher on YouTube. It really helps out the show. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. It is free. You can get access to free newsletters, including a new one that is coming out in just a few weeks. If you want access to my original reporting and analysis, it is $5 a month to become a paid subscriber to the Substack. That also funds the show and really helps keep it going because the show is supported by you, the watchers and listeners. So, I don't know, think about it. And if you don't, I totally get it. It's the holiday season. Things are tight for everybody, but please share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.